Hey Neo. Okay, let's start the event. We'll just give everyone a couple of minutes to join us. Hey Nazar, how's it going?
Hey guys.
Welcome everyone joining us. Okay, we are at a minute past the hour, so yeah, welcome. Let's kick things off. You'll notice that we have some slides today, something to focus on, some visuals rather than just our profile pictures up on the stage. So, yeah, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. Welcome to Farmer Office Hours. We're thrilled to have you join us today via Discord and our live stream on YouTube. Whether you're watching from home or tuning in on the go, thank you for making the time to be here with us. As always, we're here to answer your questions and give you insights into the latest developments at Subspace. We apologise for the recent interruptions to regular Farmer Office Hours, but we have been working on something very big, which we hope to let you all in on very soon. Joining us today there's myself, Jim. I'm the head of ecosystem. Randy, our technical community manager. Do you want to say hello, Randy?
Hello everyone.
And Nazar, our co-founder and serial consensus re-implementer. For any newbies out there, to keep up with any and all future announcements, please keep an eye on our Telegram, our Discord, our Twitter, and the forum, of course. Remember, this is an interactive session, so please feel free to raise your hand in Discord or post any questions you may have in the event stage chat at any point. Our agenda today consists of a number of items we hope will be of interest to you. We're going to kick things off with State of the Network with Randy. We're going to cover some hot topics with Jim. Then Randy's going to talk on the farming cluster. This is our main event today, and a live demo from Randy. Exciting stuff. And then I will be talking a little bit on giving everyone an update on events that we will be attending in the upcoming weeks. We will have our usual Q&A session, and then we'll close. Our goal for today, as ever on Farmer Office Hours, is not just to keep you updated, but to foster a lively exchange of ideas, answer your questions, and help you get the most out of Subspace. So let's make it another productive session. And without further ado, let's hand over to Randy, who's going to deliver one of our regular set pieces, the State of the Network. Randy, take it away.
Thank you, Jim. State of the network here. We are up to 8,646 nodes. We keep going right around 9,000, not quite breaking that 10,000 mark. Hopefully we'll do that soon. We have an amazing 132 petabytes of space now being dedicated. And we've had some new versions in the last week. New version of the Advanced CLI from May 24th and the Space Acres 0.1.21. As far as the whale watch, there hasn't been a whole lot of movement in the ranks. We still have we do have one person. It looks like they hit 42,000, and probably about 4 or 5 people in the 30,000. So it's kind of calmed down. There's no one shooting out in front anymore. But that is pretty much the state of our network.
Thanks, Randy. Maybe we bought all the SSDs available. Things are slowing down a little bit.
You know,
But
the price of those SSDs just keep going up. So I can see people a little hesitating to buy more space, but
absolutely, it's been really incredible, explosive growth up to this point. Um, so yeah, it's interesting to see it level off a little bit. Um, Thanks, Randy. Okay, so I'm going to cover hot topics. So, unfortunately, this section's a bit bare, as you can see from the slide there. This is because, by and large, we haven't had a large number of persistent problems with farming for a while now. Earlier on in the test nets, there have been some bigger issues that have prevented people farming, but essentially, if you run the software, you will be able to farm. There are some edge cases, of course. But this is a testament to the time Nazar has been spending in the community, listening to and acting on your feedback, which we are, as always, very grateful for. However, we may see that situation might change as we see some activity in the near future as people get to grips with the recently released farming cluster. And as I mentioned, that we're going to have more on that later. The one issue that I have seen being discussed between farmers in Discord and on the forum is that there is high RAM usage. I think this is related to a particular part of farming. I believe it's the plotting. Nazar can correct me here, and it does seem to be related specifically to Windows. And Nazar has been producing some test builds and homing in on the issue. I'm not sure if there's any further update, Nazar.
Um, yeah, it is again seemingly Windows specific, and I'm not quite sure what it is yet. The we have found the simple change that actually introduced this problem. The thing is that we were basically making a blocking call to read a new piece from cache, which is called a lot when we are doing plotting. And that was changed to make it asynchronous, be like rapid in asynchronous thing that allows you to read more pieces at the same time. However, test builds where we limit how many pieces we are reading didn't actually help with this. So I'm quite puzzled, like what this is possibly. What the problem is? It is not the same problem we had a while ago when we were running out of memory for different reason. This time it does show that this is a farmer that is using memory. I'm currently running it in a VM and trying to kind of reproduce it first, and then if I can reproduce it, I will be able to fix it. We are aware of the problem. We are working on it, but I don't have any solution for it yet. I guess the only workaround is to use May 06 build. That seems to be the latest one that doesn't have this particular problem, but there are some other improvements in newer builds, so your mileage may vary.
Thanks, Nazar, for that up to the minute explanation of where we are. I will find the link to the forum thread if you did want to read about it and pop that in the chat in a minute. Yeah, because that is essentially all of the hot topics at the moment. If you have a hot topic, if there's a pattern that you're seeing amongst users in your particular community, please do let us know. The first step to fixing a problem, of course, is identifying it. So yeah, let us know in the chat or in Discord or on the forum. Okay, hot topics is done. So Randy is going to talk to us a bit on the farming cluster. Now, I know that the presentation you're about to give, you gave a preview to ambassadors and it was very well received, Randy. Now, I'm going to stop streaming and give you a chance to commandeer the screen share. And Randy's going to be very brave today. He's going to do a live demo for us.
yeah, that'll be interesting. Live demos are always fun. Um, anyway, this is a topic that I'm very excited about. Most of you know that I maintain a pretty large farm, and there's always a little bit of issues when you're trying to scale up. What are the bottlenecks? How do you do redundancy? Just kind of what's the best way to get those sectors plotted as quick as possible and the most reliable setup. And Farming Cluster addresses a lot of those issues. So I've got a little slideshow prepared. Most of this comes from the documentation that we have online. And I have added just a few little bits and kind of removed some things just to streamline the presentation. But essentially, the farming cluster is designed for larger scale farmers for the most part. Some smaller farmers can actually use it for redundancy, but it seems like a lot of these things are just geared towards the larger farms. It is only available when using the advanced CLI, and it basically consists of 4 distinct components. That would be the controller, the cache, the farmer, and the plotter. Now, basically, what we have now with the advanced CLI before the farming clusters, you had your node process and you had your farmer process. And the node process doesn't really change here, but the farmer process, then you can split it into these 4 pieces. And some of the benefits we have, bandwidth efficiency. Centralized storage of the piece cache conserves bandwidth. Now, what that actually means is, right now, each farmer is maintaining their own cache. And every time it needs to take that, update that cache from the internet, it's got to go out, grab data there. One of the things that I've seen on my systems is there's almost no communication between my farmers and the outside world. So there's just a ton of bandwidth being saved. Another great thing is remote compute capability. Multiple PCs can contribute their CPU power for plotting and eventually GPUs without needing to store the plots locally. So if you have, a couple idle computers, laptops lying around that you just want to use their power, but you don't want to actually plot on, it allows you to use those, and it's really easy to set up. Redundancy. You can run multiple computers for each of these processes to enhance your redundancy in case something goes down. And the final thing that's really cool too is additional space. By moving the piece sync cache to a central location, you're freeing up roughly 1% of your SSD to have larger plots. And we'll get into, towards the end here, we'll get into a few extra things I want to talk about that. But that's freeing up extra space means larger plots, which means more rewards. The first thing that has to be done in order to set this up is we run a third-party piece of software called Nats.io, and it is used to facilitate all the communication between the farmer processes. It's pretty simple to install. The instructions are on the website, and I chose to install it via Docker because that was just fairly easy, and it runs on a very low power NAS that I have in my network. When I took this screenshot, it wasn't really doing a whole lot, but as you can see, it's running on a system with 16 gigs of RAM and 8 cores, and it's just not really using much of it. When it is running in full swing and there's a lot of plotting going on, there is quite a bit of network activity, but it doesn't have to be a super powerful box. It can also be installed as a Windows service. It can be installed in Linux box. There's just a ton of different ways to install this. I just did a little diagram here that kind of shows how it works. The NAT server sits in the middle and kind of just communicates to each of these pieces. Okay, so in order to configure all these things, there's just a few additional parameters. Each time you launch one of these processes, you need to tell it what the NAT server is, the fact that it's a cluster, and which component is being executed. And that'll become apparent here on the next slide. We'll start with the controller. I wrote here that it should be the first component to run, but it's not necessarily. You need to have a controller, but the nice thing about this setup is if any of these components go down or turned off, it recovers gracefully almost all the time. So here with the controller, we see we have our executable, and then we have this cluster parameter, and that's what's basically telling us to operate in this cluster mode. We do have to specify the NAT server, whatever IP you're using, and then the port number. And then we have the word controller. And basically that tells us what we're doing here. We're launching the controller. There are a few things that are required for the controller. That would be the base path. It needs a path to store some files to, and then how it connects to the node. There are other parameters, and if you type in this first part with its controller and do -H, you get all the help for the options that are available. And the nice thing about it is, since we have these 4 pieces split out, when you do the help, the list is far less, so it makes it a little easier to see what's available. And the controller is going to log the connections every time a farm connects, disconnects, and any piece cache sync progress, which usually you only see in the very beginning. Okay, next one is the cache process, or cache component. You can run multiple caches to distribute the load, but only one is required. And again, you do it kind of the same way. You specify cluster, the NAT server, and then the word cache. And then you just need a path to the cache. And while an SSD is recommended, I believe a hard disk can be used. 200 gigabyte is a good size to start based on the current state of the network. When you first launch this and the controller is active, it will have to download the cache the same way that if you were to launch a new farmer, it has to build the cache. So currently that does take about a day or so, maybe about half a day. The next piece is the farmer component. And this is where you would specify your plots. So same thing, executable, cluster, NAT server, the word farmer. You specify your reward address and then your path to your various plots. This can just be as many as you want. And this should look familiar because this is where, what we're used to seeing when we just run the farmer. Again, you have the help options to see what other things are available. And then the final component is the plotter. And in order to actually take care of plotting and replotting, you need to specify at least one. And it can be on the same computer as your farmer, or it can be on a separate machine. I personally don't have any plotters on I have a giant dual epic server. I don't have any plotters there, only a farmers. But then I have on my other computers, I have both. So it's able to plot to that epic machine. And again, executable, cluster, NAT server, and then just the word plotter. The logs for the plotter will show when it gets a sector to plot and when it's finished plotting. So it's pretty simple there. Now it is possible to run multiple components at the same time with the same executable. There's nothing stopping you from on the same box running these separately, but this just makes it a little bit nicer here. In this example here, I've got a cache and a plotter going. On my own network, I actually have a cache and the controller running on the same machine. But it's up to you, whatever configuration you want. If you were to use all 4, essentially, you're running the same way that the farmer would, except you're still using the cluster in the middle. Okay, remote compute possibilities. There's extensive remote compute capabilities here. I kind of touched on this earlier, but if you have machines on your network you're not using, you can launch a plotter there and it just kind of contributes to the network. As a farm requests plotting resources, it'll use them from the plotters that are available. And this works for plotting and replotting. Okay, advanced options redundancy. It is possible to set up clustering with a NAT server. That's kind of outside of our scope on how to do that. But if you do have more than one setup, you can specify more than one. You can have multiple controller components, but each one needs to have a distinct cache group. So there's going to be some options here under the controller for cache group and under the cache for cache group. And again, this stuff is available on our documentation. I just kind of wanted to real briefly go over it, that it's available. And now the demo. So, well, actually, we're going to do questions after. I'll just do the demo real quick. I have quite a farm. I'm going to leave this screen up while I'm shutting off my farm so I can show how everything starts up. Take me just a minute to issue Control C on a couple different windows.
My lights just got brighter, Randy, as you started changing things down.
Yeah. Okay, so real quick, I did stop these windows, but you can see here, this on this tab here, CPU 2, this is my Epic machine, and you can see it's been replotting. It does get a warning every once in a while if it fails, some sort of communication fails, but it automatically retries, so you don't have to worry about that. And so yeah, it just replots and gets the reward hash. And if I up arrow here, I've got quite the command here because of all my different plots available here. But essentially, it's just the farmer here. I'm not running any sort of plotter on this machine. And again, this is another computer here. I had a couple retries, but for the most part, when it runs into that, it just keeps going. So we're gonna scroll up here. Now the cluster, this is a machine I have called the cluster, but it's really got two things that are running on here. There's a controller and a cache. So I'm going to go ahead and launch that. And it basically, there's some connected events here, does some listening things. A lot of this stuff you would see normally when you launch the farmer. But it sees that if it needs to get anything else extra from the cache, it would download the cache. But I believe that this is telling me everything is fine. So this is all ready to go, but I currently don't have any farms participating. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the first one, which essentially is just a farmer. It's not a plotter. So it's connecting now. So it's there waiting. It's going to check the plots here.
Randy,
my
sorry to
Yes.
interrupt. Are you able to zoom that at all, just a little bit?
I will change the font size.
If that's
How's
possible. Thank you.
that? Is that a little
Yeah,
better?
that's better. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I had to dumb my monitor down because I have a really big monitor, but apparently when you're looking at a little Discord window, it's not good enough. So anyway, yeah, this thing is all ready to go, but there's probably nothing for it to do because it's fully plotted. But we'll just go ahead and leave that one up there. And then on CPU 1 is one where I have a farm. Let me zoom that one too. So I have this one as a farmer and a plotter. Somewhere here. Yeah. Plotter and a farmer. So I'm going to launch that. It's going to do pretty much the same thing. However, it also has now a plotter available. Now, again, I am fully plotted on my main network. So what I did is I launched another window here. This is on my Windows box. And here I am going to launch a farmer. This is no plotter, but here I have two plots that it's working on. And so it immediately starts saying, let me see if I can zoom that one again too. Maybe.
Try control and scroll wheel, maybe.
Yep, that'll do it. Okay. So it is now plotting. But the question is where is it plotting from? What plotting resources is it using? Because this is only farming. So if I go and I look at back here at my CPU 1, that is plotter and farmer, I can see that it has now received 2 plot sector requests. And so it is now contributing resources to this. Now, I also have another window here. I can say on this box I'm on, let me also make it a plotter. So I'm going to launch that. And I've specifically limited my number of threads here since this is my main box. And here shortly, it should, after it kind of registers and everything, it will use the resources for this computer as well. Matter of fact, let me put Task Manager up here. Okay, it hasn't started yet, but we'll let that go. While that's going, I want to pull up the I should have a window here for. No, I thought I did. I'm going to open it. I'm going to show you what the NAT server looks like. So I am running this on a NAS, QNAP NAS, and I can go into my containers, and I can see it here, the NATs, and I get a status here. So it's doing a little bit here. It's 158 megabits per second. Notice it kind of bounces around as it needs to pull data from the different resources. It was at 3% CPU, but so it just kind of sits there and does its thing. You never have to touch it, but yeah, the cluster really hasn't said anything other than when the farm's connected, it registers that. And still waiting from that other one to kick on to start plotting, but in maybe a minute or two, it will start contributing its plotting resources as well. At this point, we're just kind of waiting, but everything is up and running and functioning. So I think it might be a good time to answer some questions.
I can see we've got some questions. We don't have any specific to cluster farming. Has anyone in the audience got any questions about why you might want to use the cluster or how you use it? My understanding here, Randy, maybe you can explain. The idea is that this more composable approach is really useful for, excuse me, where you've got multiple machines available and you really want to lean into the characteristics of those machines. So maybe you have a CPU that's going to be strong for plotting and replotting. Maybe you have a server that's got lots of flash available. Am I missing any kind of underpinning reasons for the cluster there? And bear in mind, of course, we've got Nazar here. So you can go as technical as you like.
One of the things that I thought was really cool is when I first started using this, I only had a couple of boxes that needed to be plotted. I have 13 PCs, hundreds of terabytes, but really I only had like 3 or 4 boxes left to be plotted and maybe, I don't know, 50 terabytes. And I kind of set everything up in this mesh format, all except for the Epic machine I had as functioning as farmers and plotters. And so immediately I had the ability to complete that last space using all these machines. Whereas before I would have just only been dependent on the resources available on the machines that had the plots. So it allowed me to quickly finish what I had. And that's probably going to be important when people have farms of different sizes on different computers. They're not always going to finish in the same place. So the cluster farming allows you to spread out the load.
That's a great point, Randy. Neo has an interesting question. So does it make sense to deploy any of the cluster components over public internet as a public service?
And
Sorry.
I think bandwidth limitations are going to prevent that from happening. There is a lot of traffic happening between different components and the NAT server. And so my gut feeling here is that none of these would really be worth doing that way unless you had massive amounts of bandwidth available.
I can give a little bit more advanced sort of setup hint, maybe. NATS is really flexible tool. The fact that most people will run just one instance of that server doesn't mean it doesn't have ability to do more. So cluster setup is one thing. The other thing they support is something called leaf node, where you can have a cluster, but then you can have like another server connected to the cluster on each machine, for example. And then you would connect your components of a cluster to that local leaf node. And then if there is any communication that needs to happen between those components on that machine, it will be kind of local to that machine or that LAN or whatever. And then if it needs to communicate with something outside of that local region, it will go to the cluster and further. You can have several layers of clusters. So you can have global communication with NATs. If you have, let's say, a few data centers, you can connect them together. So you can do lots of different things. The way you specify the address of NAT server right now is just IP and port, which is unencrypted. But you can, if you want, like to use public internet, you can set up a cluster locally and cluster remotely, and you can peer them, and you can configure the access patterns in such a way that only certain messages can flow. And then hypothetically, you can have a remote, let's say, server. You have a GPU and you have some caching storage and you have a controller. So you can run those three components locally. And then you can only allow the requests and responses for plotting through to someone else outside, right? And someone else outside can connect to you, that cluster, and then they can basically request to get some sectors plotted. But that remote server will not actually request pieces from your machine, and you will not request pieces from that machine, because physically NATs will filter messages and will only allow certain messages through. So you can do a lot of like advanced stuff. It's out of the scope of the documentation at Docs Subspace Network. But if you go to docsnats.io, you can read about all of the different features they have, and you can have like a remote plotting as a service, hypothetically. And yeah, there are lots of interesting ways you can leverage that.
That's really interesting, Nazar. So you can the filtering at the NATS level. That's quite a trick thing, isn't it? That's really smart.
Yeah, you'll need to like configure accounts and then tell those accounts which like subjects, I think the name they are using, you can subscribe to and publish to and read from. But basically the idea would be that you send a small message, please plot this sector for me, and like give it an index, and then it will stream back the pieces once it has them. You will not like send individual pieces anymore, just for plotting purposes. So yeah.
Right. Another way to configure or to customize. So that's really interesting. We do have.
I can give you maybe even like more advanced example. There is this unofficial plotter, for example, right? And that basically requires you to run the whole thing, which is closed source. But if that thing supports plotting API, you can theoretically connect it to the cluster, and you can still run official farmer, you can still run official controller and node and everything, but you can just use plotting resources from that thing. And hypothetically, you can also like configure it to go through a particular like middleware that will filter messages and will not allow it to like intercept messages from other components. You can like isolate it in a small box and just let it plot for you and nothing else. So you can do those things as well. Or you can have like a proxy kind of plotter that will actually connect to some remote server. Like you can compose different bits and pieces from different vendors potentially in this kind of setup. It's like what we've shipped so far is just the very, very beginning.
Hey, that sounds very interesting.
Very cool. Yeah, it looks like you got Punky's attention. Back to the demo here. It looks like it did start using resources on my computer, and I can tell from task it was, and that it must have finished a sector. But I believe right now I have more resources available than is needed on the farmer. We've gone through a couple sectors right now, but everything is pretty much working as expected. And I can add as many plotting resources as I want to this. There is a limit on how many sectors it will plot at a time, and you can alter that with a few options. But everything seems to be good, working as expected. So I'm going to go back to, I want to talk a little bit about the piece cache. When creating a new plot without the farming cluster, a plot bin file is created at about 99% of the allocated space. And at the same time, a file called piece cache bins created roughly 1% of the space. And this is the thing it downloads that, takes, like half a day or so to download when you start off a new farm. But since the farming cluster has its own cache, this file is no longer needed, and you can delete it before you run the farmer component. It'll be recreated if you switch back to not using the cluster, and you can always move it off somewhere if you want it to restore it later. But what's going to happen here is it will then create this, when you launch under the cluster, it's going to create a larger plot bin. So if you don't delete the old file and you've pretty much filled up the space on your drive, you'll get a message that you can't allocate the space. So you'll just want to go ahead and either delete or move off that piece cache. And that's it.
That's
Any
great.
other questions?
Thanks, Randy. So I did see a few people fell foul of that. They were switching to the cluster, and they ended up maxing their drive out because, of course, they kept their non-clustered piece cache, and then the cluster tried to create its own piece cache. It is important. Thanks, Randy. That was wonderful. This is another live demo that's gone well. Okay, so TOF, when can we be able to try it? It's available right now. The docs were updated last week, I think, and actually the release went out last week, and we updated the docs towards the end of last week, I think. That's right, Randy.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So it's available now. So please do let us know how you get on with trying it out. I think Capybara has asked a question, and I think it might be quite subtle. So Capybara asked originally how to run Timekeeper. Now I know Capybara runs a Timekeeper already, and I'm wondering if what we're actually after is insight into, could we run a timekeeper efficiently on one of the cluster components? So I guess what you'd be looking for is one that has low CPU usage to no CPU usage. I get what we really don't want, I guess, is something that has a characteristics where it would suddenly spike CPU usage. Nazar, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. So right now, in order to run a timekeeper, you need to specify -- timekeeper parameter on the node, and then there is also timekeeper CPUs that you can customize to tell it which CPU cores to use, because in some CPUs there are like more preferred or like better binned cores that will boost higher, and you would want to use that. It's more like a temporary solution. The midterm solution will be to have a separate RPC endpoints, or like RPC methods maybe, on the node that you will be able to connect a separate timekeeper application to. And then that timekeeper application can be running on a dedicated machine. And as we said a few times already in the past, that machine will likely ideally be overclocked. And the idea is that the timekeeper needs to run basically as fast as possible. And in an ideal situation, you would run maybe several of them, and you would run them on overclocked machines that are not even stable, right? But you need to have a node which is stable. Otherwise, it may like crash, or it may fail to verify the block which is correct block, or you may verify block as correct which is not correct, and so on. So you want to run node on a stable machine, which currently is like a challenge because you have like two conflicting requirements. But in the future, what we'll do, we'll be able to run Timekeeper on an overclocked machine that may crash from time to time, but if you have several timekeepers, that doesn't really matter because you will still have some of them on the network. But each and every one of them will be able to run even faster than before. And then for the node, you can have any like regular normal machine. It will be able to keep up just fine. So that is kind of the idea, that RPC endpoint and separate application are not do not exist yet. I believe we have an issue on GitHub, and if someone is feeling adventurous, ping us on GitHub, and you can try to work on that before we get to it.
Thanks, Nazar. And is it only possible on dedicated node without farming clusters? I think you just covered that.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Like farming cluster is completely orthogonal. You can run timekeeper as well.
Thanks, Nazar. Okay. And Kier asks, I see they've had an answer already. Can I transfer plot disks from one server to another? Plots are portable, so yes, you can. Okay. So I see there's other questions, but we will hold those for Q&A at the end. Is there anything else on farming cluster? If there is, pop it in the chat. It does look like we've covered all the farming cluster questions for now. So Randy, do you mind relinquishing the screen share? Thank you, and well done for the comprehensive demo there. That was super informative. Okay.
I am really excited about this farming cluster. It's really cool. So I am looking forward to seeing a bunch of questions on it in chat here as people get started on it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, I think, our most upvoted or thumbs upped issue in GitHub, which was wonderful to see. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears for a minute. Just want to talk about Subspace attending some events at the moment. So as you can see from the slide there, yesterday a large contingent of team members set off to Austin, Texas to attend Consensus 2024, including members of ecosystem engineering and marketing, amongst others. They will all be attending and making their presence felt at the event. Consensus claimed 10 years of decentralizing the future on their website, with the stated goals of dialogue, discovery, and deal making front and center. We love alliteration, and we love all three of those activities. Consensus is the world's largest, longest running, and most influential gathering that brings together all sides of the cryptocurrency, blockchain, and Web3 community, they claim. It is called Consensus for a reason. The event is the primary forum where the industry comes together to discuss the most pivotal matters of the day, highlight the biggest successes, and debate the most critical conversations. Why are we going? What do we want to achieve? Subspace, we want to connect. We're eager to meet fellow enthusiasts who we can share ideas with, forge connections with those guys. We want to learn. The event is a great resource for knowledge with insights from some of the brightest minds in blockchain, crypto, and Web3. And we also want to share. We want to share and showcase the strides Subspace has made and the vision that propels us forward. We want to tell our story, and we want everyone here to be a part of it. So let's meet up. If you are heading to Consensus 2, that's wonderful. We'd love nothing more than to meet you in person. Whether you're a long-time member of our community or just Subspace curious, come find us. And from Ecosystem, we have Ryan and Emil. You can contact them directly on their Ryan and Emil at subspace.network email addresses, and we will try and work out a way that we can get together. And of course, the planned events do not end there. Our very own Fredik, who's in the crowd answering some of your questions, Maxim and Daria will be attending the Crypto Valley conference in Switzerland on the 6th and 7th of June. Max is actually involved in Crypto Valley at a deeper level. He's one of the board members, so he not only advises the project Subspace, but the Crypto Valley Association too. This is an event with a multitude of attendees from different sectors in the industry. And this year has focused panels and events on AI and blockchain. Again, if you are attending and would like to meet up, please reach out to Fredik, again, fredik@subspace.network, or any member of the ecosystem team, and we will put you in touch with the right contacts. We will be providing updates from both events on our socials, so please do follow along and chime in with any questions you may have. Such as, would you like us to try and attend a particular mini event? Would you like us to approach a particular attendee? What questions would you like us to ask them? And yeah, so just an update there on events. Exciting time for Subspace, of course, and we are making our presence felt. Up next, we have the open Q&A section, and as I mentioned earlier, we're lucky enough to have Nazar joining us today. So if you have any really technical questions, especially on the farming cluster, please do pop them in the chat on the sidebar. Right, so I can see that there are a number of questions here about community offering and when will 3H end, and any plans to rebrand. I'm afraid I'm going to do a complete cop out, guys. What I'm going to suggest is that we're here for farmer office hours. The clue is in the name. There would, of course, be a very big announcement that we'd have been working on and planning for weeks when we want to kind of really finalize exactly the last few steps to mainnet launch. What I'm going to ask you to do is to stay tuned and keep your eye on those announcement channels. Do we have any other questions about farming specifically? Let's have a look. Okay, so someone asked about Stake Wars 2. Yeah, we've promised Stake Wars 2. It is being designed as we speak. You're going to be, I think everyone's going to be excited when you read about it. It's going to have more ways to participate than Stake Wars 1. And yeah, I think it's going to be fun. There's more activities for people to do to help us to test certain specific aspects of the network. Of course, we're going to have a new domain soon, which means that we'll be able to test things in a multi-domain setup. So just looking down for any more questions. Okay, Todd confirms there will be no public token sale. Joss, I am going to again suggest that you keep your eye on announcements. Okay, when will Astral Explorer, for this is from Penguin, when will Astral Explorer start showing rewards for past test phases, including Stake Wars 1? It is being worked on as we speak. We've had some issues with the way the squid, which is like kind of like the graph for substrate, was causing us some issues. So we've actually had to kind of divert focus over into splitting up the squids that index the data. But yeah, it's still planned. I'm afraid I can't give you a date right now, Penguin, but it is being worked on. If you follow GitHub, if you follow the Astral GitHub, you'll see commits that are bringing us closer and closer. Okay. Ludong, again, keep your eyes peeled for announcements. As Todd says, Subspace Foundation. So the Subspace Foundation will be responsible for launching mainnet, and there will be additional comms very soon, tantalizingly close. Okay. I don't think I've missed any questions. I know that some I can't really answer very well for you at the moment, but you can expect that there will be a satisfying update very soon. Don't have a date for that, Joss, I'm afraid. If we did, it would be in your hands already.
Just to add to that, though, I am seeing a lot of internal discussions about that, so it is being worked on.
Mm. And actually, so it's very important to distinguish tokenomics from token economics, because we've spent a lot of time modeling the economics, like how the incentives work, with block science, who are very well respected in the space. We actually spoke to them at our recent off-site in Palo Alto. We are planning to have a call with Daria, one of our wonderful researchers, and talk on that and kind of run you through the thousands and thousands of simulations that took place to arrive at the conclusions that we have. Okay, guys, anyone want to talk about farming? Any plans to sell Subspace t-shirts? Right. Does anyone? There is a Shopify Bitseek. Let me see if I can find it for you. You do have to bear in mind, of course, that Shopify, the service, can only deliver to certain regions, which has caused us issues in the past. Bear with me. Let me see if I can find a link for you. Makes great radio. Okay, Randy snagged some merch at the offsite. Yeah, quite right, Joss. We have been aggressively nabbing talent. Again, we have a big coordinated announcement that's not really for farmer office hours. I appreciate your energy and your appetite to hear more about that, but you're going to have to bear with us just a little bit longer. Okay, so there's our storefront. You can grab a hoodie. Sorry, it's not a t-shirt. It's a hoodie and a hat is what we have on there at the moment.
Can maybe give another not so obvious use case for the farming cluster. There were some users asking how they can schedule, for example, plotting, so it happens in a particular time. Maybe you're not using computer, or maybe electricity is cheaper, or whatever. And there is a button in Space Acres where you can pause plotting for any number of amount of time you want. But you can now do the same with CLI with farming cluster. You can just shut down the plotting part, and you can start it back up anytime you want. And while it's down, the farmer will just wait for the resources to become available. So that's just one, maybe not so trivial or obvious use case.
Certainly very useful though. Yeah, so you can take advantage of scheduling. Maybe you need bandwidth in the day. Maybe you get cheaper electricity at night. Makes a lot of sense. It's a great feature and a great use case. Okay, guys. Right, so I'm not seeing any more questions. Of course, it's not the end of the conversation on the call because we are always cruising Discord, as you know. You can find myself and Randy regularly in there, almost 24 hours a day between us. And of course, there's the forum where you can get access to developers and researchers. You can see some very thoughtful discussions going on in there. About all sorts of topics. So I'm going to wrap things up, guys. But before I do, I want to express our heartfelt thanks to each and every one of you for joining us. Your engagement and questions have made this another wonderful event, and we appreciate your continued support and enthusiasm for what we're building here at Subspace. I want you to stay tuned for upcoming events such as Stake Wars 2. We are expecting to announce the parameters for the incentivized competition soon, and you will not want to miss it. As I mentioned earlier, there are a number of interesting changes and new ways to participate when you compare it to Stake Wars 1. We encourage everyone to get involved, whether it's by contributing to translations on crowding, joining our ambassador program, or simply participating in our community discussions. Your contributions are what make our network strong and our community vibrant. Again, we have a massive announcement that we're just crossing the T's and dotting the I's on. Please do bear with us just for a tiny bit longer. So thank you once again for spending your time with us. Keep an eye on our Telegram, Discord, Twitter, and forum for future announcements. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. Until then, keep farming, keep questioning, and as always, stay connected. Thanks, everyone.